Here's what I think the answer is. The answer is because from a larger context, when you're looking at the two primary covenants, and I'm going to close with this, but I'll pick up part of this again next week, so don't worry if you're not catching it now. From an overall perspective, if you look at corporate Israel in view, which is what the author to Hebrews wants us to see, when we're talking about corporate Israel, there are two primary covenants in view. There's the first covenant, the prote, which is the covenant made at Sinai. It is the first covenant that God made with corporate Israel after he brought them out of Egypt. He brought them to Sinai and cut a first covenant with them. That's the earthly representation of God's agreement with them. And then there is a second heavenly internal corporate covenant that God is going to cut with Israel, that indeed he has cut on an individual level as people brought into the new covenant on an individual basis as they profess genuine faith in God via faith in his son Messiah Yeshua. But on a corporate level, this awaits a future fulfillment. Indeed, that's why Jeremiah says that it's going to happen in the last days. Behold, the days are coming, right? This is a corporate promise that has yet to be fulfilled on a national level with Israel. So those are the two covenants in view, just those two. First one, Mosaic covenant. Second one, Messianic covenant, or the new covenant if you want to use that terminology. But here's the important point. At a larger level, there are those two covenants, broadly speaking. But as we kind of zoom in to catch more of the features or more of the details, because the focal point of the writer, of our author here in Hebrews, is the Levitical system to include the priestly ministry, right? And the system of sacrifices and atonement, as is compared and contrasted between the earthly Levitical system and the heavenly priestly system by Messiah, right? Those are the contrasts. Then it is likely, in my opinion, that he left out the word covenant because he wants us to understand that the first here in verse 7 is actually referencing primarily the priesthood. So let me insert that word and see if this makes sense. For if that first priesthood had been faultless, there would have been no occasion to look for a second priesthood. Do you understand what I mean there? That first ministry of priests, if that were faultless, then there wouldn't have been an occasion to look for an additional priestly system that would actually bring us to the goal. And this is the fault that we're going to describe. We'll talk about this next week, but the teaser this week is that the fault that the writer describes, and he tells us in the first few words of verse 8 of this chapter, he finds fault with them. The them at a larger level is the entire people of Israel. That's the context of the next few verses, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. The fault is the people of Israel, the house of Israel and the house of Judah. That's the people that God finds fault with. But in specific, we could also understand that the them that he finds fault with in verse 8 of Hebrews here is the priests themselves. And the fault he finds with them is that they are unable to bring the worshiper to the goal of having a cleansed conscience. And we'll read about that cleansed conscience in chapter 9 next week and also in chapter 10 the week following.